Hi, good afternoon. This presentation is usually meant to educate about blockchain, a little bit of technical. I'm sorry about that, but it's difficult to avoid it. And as well, the new forms of governance, the new forms of actual, that we're talking about, the topic we're talking about, company culture and company organization, and how blockchain is changing a lot of that, and how blockchain as well is changing the way to finance, the way to send money around the world, and basically our approach to finance in general and personal value and monetary systems as well. So just quickly, a little disclaimer, because I'm going to talk about what you could refer to as investment or securities or potential investment. So we always have this little disclaimer saying that if you buy some of the instruments that you see, well, be careful, basically. So this is my background. I used to work in private equity, and I did also a bit of venture capital work at the international level, mainly in Greater China and emerging markets. And in 2013, I discovered Bitcoin, because as you may know, blockchain is a buzzword today, which has its pros and cons. A lot of hype is not always the best thing. But the original digital currency that put blockchain to the light is actually Bitcoin. And one may say that Bitcoin is what it's to blockchain what email is to the internet. So basically, Bitcoin is an application. So when I discovered Bitcoin with my partners, we created first a virtual incubator that was meant to help startups around the world grow, because my idea was I could basically anticipate the fact that there will be many entrepreneurs looking at that and thinking, wow, this can change things. Let's do something with this. This can help me send funds across borders. This can help me create new wallets, new payment processors. So the first part, the transactional part, was a big thing in 2013. And then in 2014, the whole world started to realize the potential of blockchain technologies, and then shifted towards blockchain, and institutions started looking at it, which I'm going to explain quickly. So we founded Seedcoin Incubator, Blockchain Space Accelerator, and Concilium, which is an investment company. So what is a blockchain? Now, you probably have heard about it. You also have heard about Bitcoin, sometimes, unfortunately, in negative ways. But usually, even large organizations today, banks, insurance companies, are looking at blockchain as a new way to run, basically, data, to store data, to secure data. So why are they using blockchain? They're using blockchain because originally, blockchain is this solution to the problem of digital cash. Digital cash is not new. Digital cash is a concept that has been experimented with for the past decades, maybe a couple of decades. People have tried to create digital cash, but then obviously you fall against the problem that as anything digital, you could reproduce it indefinitely. So how to avoid what we call double spending? The fact that Alice in one place can send the same amount of value, digital cash, than Bob in another location from, for example, the same recipient or to different recipients. How to solve that? And the solution is blockchain. So blockchain is basically, as the word says, a chain of blocks. Each block has transactions. And the great thing about it, and especially with the public one, is that you can go back and check what is in the blockchain. Check all the transactions that have been made. And there is, in that system, another trick called hash, and initially hash cache, but it is used. So hashing means taking any kind of document, any kind of amount of data, and transforming it into a fixed string of characters of a fixed size. This is hash. So you can take any large document you want, hash it. And in the case of blockchain, the information that is hashed and hashed through without going too far into a Merkle tree, is basically the transactions. So all the transactions are hashed, put into the block. Each block every 10 minutes for Bitcoin, for example, faster on other blockchains. There are hundreds of blockchains around the world. It's open source. Well, you cannot go back. If you go back and try to change anything, the hash will be, you're basically destroying the chain. So the new chain that is actually where you can go and look for all the transactions, you're going to be destroying it if you try to change anything. That's why it's a new trust system. That's why there is transparency, and that's why there is accountability that goes with it, because you cannot erase an entry that has been done. So now the cost efficiency part, that depends, of course, how you use it. But basically for the moment, and in the case of a public blockchain, you have a mechanism that is called proof of work. There are thousands of computers around the world, and you have to be aware that the Bitcoin network is the most powerful computational network on the planet. It has more computational power than all the supercomputers of the governments combined together, thousands of times. So basically, all this energy, all this computational power is being used to enable these transactions to go through, to enable to send Bitcoin to wallets, and this is quite remarkable in a way, because since 2009, when it has been created, no one has hacked that network. Now, you may have heard about hacks of exchanges or of wallets, etc. This is human failure, or maybe technical failure at that level, but never at the blockchain level. So this is the original blockchain in a way. In a village in the island of Yap, in Micronesia, I think, people were aware about the wealth of their villagers by showing everyone these limestones, and people knew it was an oral transmission of wealth. So they knew that this stone belongs to whom, and they know how much this person is, let's say, worth, or at the time on that island. And it was a representation of wealth. And the similarity with blockchain is that in the same way, a blockchain is a ledger, and in that ledger, you have a certain amount of Bitcoin, you have a certain amount of digital currencies, and you basically don't need the whole world can see how much Bitcoin there is. So it's a ledger format, a ledger which is replicated and distributed among thousands of nodes around the world. So Bitcoin, I just talked about it. Now, you have to know that there are many private, or what we could call enterprise chains. And these enterprise chains are basically using the same technical approach and using it in a private way, a little bit like you would say intranet versus internet. So internet being the public blockchains, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and intranet being the private blockchains where you have a centralized governance and you have rules. So for example, not all the nodes can have access. That's why it's called permissioned, and the public blockchains are called permissionless. Anyone can become a node, anyone can be on a network. There are very large industry initiatives around the world. There are consortia of usually banks, stock exchanges, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to see how blockchain can be applied to, for example, settlement, post-trade, even all kinds of financial derivatives, for example, transactions, etc. But be careful, blockchain is not only useful for finance, but obviously, since it all comes from a transactional application, the digital currency, a lot of banks, a lot of insurance today, companies and stock exchanges are looking at it for that. Now, in the world of blockchain, you have what we call instant settlement. So basically, an asset is going to be exchanged instantly. You don't need the usual T+2, 2 days to settle. You don't need the clearing houses. So basically, there's a new model of disintermediation. And that new model of disintermediation, the banks and the large institutions, the regulators are looking at it, because then it could mean that a whole new world, a new game for the financial institutions. This is one of them called Hyperledger, which is headed by the Linux Foundation and IBM. So this quickly, smart contracts are basically programs running on the blockchain. So you can have an input, which can be either from the blockchain, like a transaction, or it can be from the outside world. For example, the price of gold. If the price of gold reaches that number, it's going to trigger some operation. It's going to trigger an output on the blockchain. And of course, for that, you need what we call Oracle services. So there's a whole ecosystem being built around that, around these new technologies. A DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization, which is basically a a company that lives on the blockchain. So it doesn't have necessarily a legal entity. It doesn't necessarily have, of course, an office, etc. But it's a company that is going to basically run through a smart contract. And one of them raised a lot of money last summer, $150 million in a few weeks. But then there was a hack, and there were some controversies around it. But the experiment shows that there is a potential, and there are some smaller DAOs, we call them, living today and raising funds. In terms of investment, $1 billion has been invested since 2013, about more than $1 billion. And as you can see, in 2015, a lot of large organizations have been investing there. One of the reasons is there is a shortage of talent in that space. So a lot of the companies like banks and exchanges, Goldman Sachs, etc., what they want when they acquire these startups, they want to acquire the talent as well and the technology. This is just to show you the diversity of the ecosystem. They are not only exchanges, they're not only digital currency companies, they're also software as a service, we can call it blockchain as a service, there are miners, there are a lot of, there is a large value chain in that sector, which would take quite a while to go into details, but this gives you an idea of the different companies, how much they're raising. It's a world of startups for now. There are only a few companies that I would say have a certain amount of employees and a certain turnover to show that they are like maybe medium-sized companies, but a lot of them have been raising anywhere from seed stage 1 million, 2 million to up to $100 million up to now. So initially we invested in the upper part of this table, so the transactional services, and now we're looking more at security, data, smart contracts, and IoT. If you think about it, on the IoT devices, so a fridge, a printer, etc., devices that we're going to use all tomorrow that we're using today, but they're going to start paying, transacting. It's much more logical for these devices to use cryptocurrencies to transact. The investments in blockchain have now overpassed the investment in the transactional part, which is Bitcoin. I'm sorry, I'm going through the slide a bit quicker because then I'm going to run out of time. So that's ICO. It's an interesting concept, especially in the world of crowdsourcing, because it's a kind of crowdfunding, but the difference is you're going to issue tokens. You're going to issue new tokens, and the holders of the tokens are usually stakeholders, sometimes maybe even shareholders, and they use the token to either vote on some decisions or to represent an economic interest in the platform. So there are different types of tokens. You're going to have what we call the app coins, which are basically the tokens that you use in the platform. And there are also tokens which are just representing shares, and they are issued against another cryptocurrency. So for example, Bitcoin or Ether. And the people are going to finance their companies this way. As an example, a company only a couple of weeks ago called Golem, which is a supercomputer across different computers network. It's kind of a universal computer for things like DNA sequencing, etc., maybe protein folding. They raised in about a couple of hours $8 million this way. So basically what they did, they told the whole community, we're going to issue these tokens. If you want to buy these tokens, this is the price. Of course, there are controversies around regulations and securities law, but nevertheless, it's something that is growing, and it's something I think that is worth mentioning because it's a new way of fundraising, and it's a new way also to empower the buyers of these tokens. And of course, in the case of cryptocurrencies, which has no territoriality, there is no frontier, someone in China, someone in South America can participate and can buy these tokens just by exchanging it through their wallets. So many applications in that space at the moment. So quickly going over an example of a company that we invested in called Factom. They help securing data, and they help publishing this data first on their own layer and then anchoring it on different blockchains. And what it does is that the blockchain will timestamp the data, and the blockchain will guarantee that this data has been recording at that time. And this is great, for example, for land registry, where in certain countries, maybe land registry is either paper-based or there could be some corruption. In this case, you're going to make sure everyone, the land commission, the banks, the lending money for mortgages, the owners of the land themselves are going to be sure that this transaction has happened and this information has been put in a database at a certain point of time. And this was a topic of the Economist last year in which Factom was mentioned. BigchainDB, other project, Ethereum, just going through quickly. Rootstock, this is a little bit technical, but these are smart contract platforms. And this gives you an overview of the blockchain tech marketplace. So these are the different areas that blockchain can affect and the different applications where blockchain can be useful. So you see on the green quadrant, which are the digital currency, this is what I would call the first generation of services, all the transactional services, P2P lending, remittances, microfinance, payments in general. But then you have the record keeping, which goes into much larger propositions. They go to compete with Oracle, SAP, etc., very large companies. The securities, which competes with clearing houses, with very specialized financial companies, and then the smart contracts, which can be used for digital rights, for music, for art, wagers, escrow, etc. So a very large, and that's why we call it game-changing, is because it's a very large and broad scope of applications in which you can use somewhere blockchain technology. So the risks and benefits, like any other network, security, scalability, attacks and collusion, these are the risks in this technology. But the benefits are resilience, the fact that it's decentralized. If one node fails, it doesn't take down the whole network. Immutability, the fact that you cannot go back and change things unless you do what we call a hard fork, but that's another topic. Auditability, the fact that all the transactions are recorded. So when people say Bitcoin can be used for illegal things, well, it's not so smart because all the transactions are being recorded, as opposed to cash, for example. A new trust system and cost savings if you do it properly. And of course, the challenges are the costs versus benefits, the adoption rate. So that's part of what I do as well, education. So I invest in these companies through my company, but we also educate. We educate at the tech level and at the business level as well. And of course, the issues of privacy, legality, and regulation. And I would say on this, we're in Brussels here, I would say regulation basically has to catch up. And as in a similar way as crowdfunding, it has to come and learn about these technologies and then adapt the regulations to it. Thank you very much.
Do we have can we take one question at least?
Sure.
Okay, let's do one question, please.
Let's take one question.
Anyone? Christoph?
Maybe it's a stupid question. So my ignorance, sorry for that. But right now, I'm signing a lot of contracts with, I sign it from wherever I am in the world, and they used to be quite legal or documents. Is that where I can sign and then let it go forward? Is there a blockchain behind that? Is that what I must see as the legal documents that you're talking about?
So in that space, you can use blockchain for the notarization.
Yeah.
So basically, you can take this document and anchor it on the blockchain, and because there is a little bit of space for that. So basically, the blockchain is transacting data, and some of that data could be the hash of your document. So notarization. The Factom is working with a company in China that notarizes 100 million documents a year. But what you're describing, which is more like digital signature, can also be done through the blockchain. I mean, right now, it probably is not done through the blockchain. Okay. But for example, Visa is working with large companies on digital signatures for example, renting a car. When you go rent a car, you can have a system that all digital, whereby the information of the contract goes on the blockchain to prove that this has happened at this time. But yes, this is one of the potential applications that large companies are looking at right now. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Eddy.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Eddy.
Thank you.